The alarms blared through Research Station Epsilon as Dr. Ethan Powell frantically downloaded his research data. 6 years of xenobiology studies couldn't be abandoned, even as evacuation orders echoed through the corridors. Unknown vessels have breached our defensive perimeter. All personnel proceed to escape pods immediately. Through the laboratory window, he spotted sleek, silvery crafts, the Valkyrie, a warrior race from the Cygnus system. His download completed with a soft chime just as the laboratory door slid open. In the doorway stood a figure that stole his breath away. Nearly 7 feet tall with copper skin, she had sharp yet harmonious features and luminescent violet eyes. Her form-fitting armor emphasized her powerful, athletic build while revealing distinctly feminine curves. "Human," she said, her voice melodic despite the harsh translator. "You will come with me." Ethan raised his hands. "I'm a scientist, not a soldier." The alien tilted her head, the crest of feather-like appendages along her scalp shifting. "That is why you live while others do not. I am Commander Talia of the Valkyrie Imperium. Your knowledge has value." Marched through corridors littered with signs of struggle, Ethan averted his eyes from the still forms they passed. The commander's warriors, all female, moved with precision, collecting technology. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked. Commander Talia glanced down. "Your species is an anomaly. Physically weak, yet rapidly expanding. We seek to understand this paradox." "So I'm a lab specimen now?" Ethan couldn't hide his bitterness. To his surprise, she laughed, a sound like crystal wind chimes. "You study life forms. Now you will be studied. There is symmetry in this, is there not?" Aboard the Valkyrie ship, Ethan was led to quarters hastily modified for human comfort. Hours passed before Talia returned, now dressed in a close-fitting uniform revealing more of her copper skin and the subtle patterns swirling across her arms like natural tattoos. "You have been given nutrition?" she asked. Ethan nodded toward the untouched food. "I'm not hungry." Talia approached with predatory grace. "You will need strength. Your body is inefficient even at peak condition." "Forgive me if captivity affects my appetite," Ethan retorted. Something flickered across her features, amusement. "You show spirit despite fear. This is unexpected." She circled him slowly. "Your data suggests humans bond closely with those who share their imprisonment. Stockholm Syndrome, you call it." Her violet eyes met his. "Will you bond with me, Dr. Powell?" Ethan swallowed hard. "That's not how it works." "We shall see." She reached out, her long fingers brushing his cheek. Ethan flinched but didn't retreat. Her touch was warmer than human skin, slightly textured. "Your studies on interspecies communication will prove useful. You will work directly with me." As she turned to leave, Ethan called after her, "Why me?" "There were other scientists." Talia paused, looking back. "Your files indicated unusual adaptive thinking. And," a slight curve touched her lips, "your physical parameters are aesthetically harmonious by Valkyrie standards." The door closed, leaving Ethan alone with the startling implication. He was a prisoner, yes, but perhaps something more in the alien commander's eyes. Something that might keep him alive long enough to escape. Or long enough to forget he wanted to. 3 cycles had passed since Ethan's capture, though he struggled to track time aboard the Valkyrie vessel. Commander Talia had assigned him private quarters adjacent to her own, a privilege that drew suspicious glances from her crew. Today, she sat across from him at a small table, her violet eyes intent as she manipulated holographic symbols between them. "Your pronunciation improves," she said, her translator now set to occasional use rather than constant. "The third tone still eludes you." Ethan attempted the Valkyrie greeting again, earning a rare smile from Talia. "Better." Your vocal structure lacks the secondary resonance chamber, yet you adapt. She leaned forward, studying him. Adaptation is your species' strength. And conquest is yours? He couldn't keep the edge from his voice. Talia's expression hardened. You judge what you do not understand. The Valkyrie take what is necessary for survival. So did we, once, Ethan admitted. It didn't end well for anyone. Their linguistic session continued, but the tension lingered until an alarm pulsed through the ship. Talia rose swiftly, her hand instinctively checking the weapon at her hip. Stay here, she commanded, striding to the door. Ethan followed despite her order. What's happening? She turned, unexpectedly close, her tall frame towering over him. For a moment, he felt the full power of her presence, not just physical strength but the intensity of her being. A breach in the containment field. Nothing that concerns you. I might be able to help. Before xenobiology, I specialized in environmental systems. Indecision crossed her features before she nodded sharply. Come. But stay behind me. In the lower decks, chaos reigned. A chamber glowed with ominous purple light, and several Valkyrie warriors lay unconscious near the entrance. Radiation leak, Talia explained tersely. The barrier is failing. Ethan scanned the alien equipment, recognizing principles if not specific designs. Your systems are trying to compensate but overloading. You need to redirect the flow, not contain it. Talia barked orders in her native tongue. The remaining warriors moved quickly, following Ethan's gestures as he indicated control panels. There, he pointed. That conduit, it needs to cycle open, not closed. Working together, they managed to stabilize the breach. As emergency protocols engaged, Talia pulled Ethan back to safety, her hand firmly gripping his arm. In the corridor, she released him, breathing heavily. Something had changed in her gaze as she looked at him. You risked yourself for my crew, she said quietly. Ethan shrugged. I risked myself for anyone who would have died. Human or Valkyrie doesn't matter when it comes to that. Without warning, Talia stepped closer. Her hand rose to his face, fingers tracing his jawline with unexpected gentleness. Your species confounds me, she murmured. So fragile, yet you show strength in unexpected ways. Heart racing, Ethan remained still under her touch. This close, he could smell her alien scent, something like cinnamon and ozone. Perhaps, she continued, there is more to learn from each other than either of our kinds has acknowledged. Her face lowered toward his, hesitant, curious. Ethan knew he should pull away, remember his status as prisoner, his loyalty to humanity. Instead, he found himself leaning forward, closing the distance. Their lips met, hers warmer, firmer than human lips, yet the contact sent a shock of recognition through him. The kiss was brief, exploratory, ending as Talia pulled back with visible confusion at her own actions. This requires further study, she said, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. Behind them, a sharp exclamation broke the moment. A Valkyrie officer stood watching, her expression one of undisguised disgust. Talia straightened immediately, authority returning to her posture. Return to your station, Second Lieutenant. After the officer departed, Talia turned back to Ethan. That was impulsive. Among my kind, such physical research is conducted with more formality. Despite everything, Ethan laughed. Is that what we're calling it? Research? For a moment, Talia looked offended. Then, remarkably, she joined his laughter. Perhaps humans have infected me with their impulsivity, she said. Come. We have much to discuss, privately. The whispers followed Talia throughout the ship. Ethan could sense the tension even without understanding every word of Valkyrie being spoken. 2 weeks had passed since their impulsive kiss, and though neither had mentioned it directly, everything between them had changed. "Your crew disapproves of me," Ethan noted as they shared a meal in Talia's private quarters. She sliced a purple fruit with precise movements, her copper fingers dexterous despite their strength. "They disapprove of my interest in you. The Valkyrie do not fraternize with subject species. Is that what I am to you? A subject?" Ethan asked, watching her face carefully. Talia set down her knife, meeting his gaze directly. "You were. Now." She hesitated, searching for words. "You are an anomaly. A disruption to my ordered existence." Ethan smiled. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It was not intended as such," she replied, though a hint of amusement curved her lips. "Lieutenant Vex has formally challenged my leadership. She believes I have been compromised." The revelation chilled him. "What does that mean for you?" "For us? A challenge requires response. Combat, typically." She resumed eating, as if discussing nothing more significant than weather. "Combat? Talia, you can't." "I am Valkyrie," she interrupted sharply. "This is our way." Before Ethan could argue further, the ship lurched violently, throwing him from his seat. Talia was instantly alert, moving to the communication panel on the wall. Rapid Valkyrie exchanges followed before she turned to Ethan, expression grave. "Human vessels. They've found us." The realization struck him with conflicting emotions. Rescue? Or the beginning of a war he'd inadvertently helped ignite? "I should be on the command deck," Talia said, already moving toward the door. "I'm coming with you," Ethan insisted. "If those are Earth ships, I might help prevent bloodshed." Reluctance crossed her features, but she nodded. On the command deck, chaos reigned. Tactical displays showed 3 human battlecruisers surrounding the Valkyrie vessel. "They are hailing us," reported a junior officer. "Open communications," Talia ordered, standing tall. A human admiral appeared on screen, his expression hardening at the sight of the Valkyrie commander. "This is Admiral Garrett of the Earth Defense Fleet. You are holding Earth citizens against their will. Return them immediately or face consequences." Talia's posture remained unbending. "We have 1 human aboard. A scientist who has been treated well." "Let me speak to him," demanded the admiral. Talia glanced at Ethan, who stepped forward into view. "Dr. Powell," the admiral acknowledged. "Are you unharmed?" "I am," Ethan confirmed. "Admiral, the situation is complex. I believe peaceful resolution is possible." Lieutenant Vex suddenly moved forward. "Commander, they surround us. This human has compromised you, he planned this." "Stand down, Lieutenant," Talia ordered, but the tension on the bridge intensified. The admiral's voice hardened. "You have 1 hour to release Dr. Powell, or we open fire." As communications ended, Vex turned on Talia. "You brought this upon us with your weakness for this creature. Enough." Talia's voice cracked like thunder. "Secure your station." Left alone in Talia's quarters during emergency preparations, Ethan paced anxiously. When she finally returned, her expression was unreadable. "Your people demand your return," she said flatly. "And you? What do you want?" Ethan asked, moving closer. Talia's composure cracked slightly. "What I want is irrelevant. I am commander first. And after that?" He reached for her hand, surprised when she didn't pull away. "After that, I am still Valkyrie." But her fingers intertwined with his, her warmth spreading through his palm. "But I find myself changed since meeting you." Ethan stepped closer, eliminating the distance between them. "I don't want to leave. Not like this." Talia's free hand rose to his face, tracing the contours now familiar to her touch. "Your loyalty should be to your kind. My loyalty is to where I choose to give it, he whispered. This time when they kissed, there was nothing exploratory about it. Her arms encircled him with careful strength, his hands finding the sensitive ridges along her neck that made her breath catch. They clung together, two beings from worlds apart, finding something neither had expected. If I return to the humans, Ethan said against her lips, come with me. As an ambassador, not a conqueror. Talia pulled back, conflict evident in her luminous eyes. You ask the impossible. I'm human, he smiled sadly. The impossible is our specialty. The ultimatum from Earth forces hung over the Valkyrie ship like a storm cloud. In Talia's quarters, time seemed suspended as she and Ethan clung to each other, aware that their paths were about to diverge, or transform entirely. There must be another way, Ethan murmured against her copper skin. Their bodies entwined on her sleeping platform, the differences in their physiology now a source of fascination rather than alienation. Talia's fingers traced patterns across his chest. My duty demands I protect my crew. Your return would satisfy your military. And us? What about what's happened between us? Her violet eyes met his, vulnerability showing beneath her warrior's facade. Among the Valkyrie, what we've shared would form a life bond. But between our species. Ethan silenced her doubt with another kiss, deeper than before. Her response was immediate, her powerful body arching against his with carefully restrained strength. What had begun as curiosity had evolved into passion and neither could deny. Later, as they lay catching their breath, the ship's communication system chimed. Commander, came Lieutenant Vex's voice, tight with disapproval. The human vessels are moving into offensive positions. Talia rose, magnificent in her unclothed state, patterns swirling across her copper skin. Prepare the shuttle. I will deliver the human myself. After she cut the communication, she turned to Ethan. You must return to your people. And you'll start a war with humanity, he challenged, sitting up. No. Her decision seemed to form as she spoke. I will negotiate. Propose an exchange of knowledge instead of conflict. Hope flared in Ethan's chest. You defy your orders? My primary orders were to study humanity, not provoke war. She began dressing with military efficiency. But the Imperium may not see it that way. Ethan understood the risk she was taking. You could be executed for this. Talia's expression hardened. I am still commander. My crew will follow my orders, for now. On the shuttle bay, Lieutenant Vex waited with a small contingent of warriors. Her posture radiated challenge as Talia approached with Ethan. The human leaves without conditions? Vex demanded. With conditions, Talia corrected. I go as envoy to establish diplomatic relations. Murmurs spread among the assembled Valkyrie. Vex stepped forward. You betray our mission for this creature? The High Command will have your rank for this. The mission was observation and assessment, Talia replied evenly. I have observed. I have assessed. Humanity is not the primitive threat we assumed. Look at you, Vex hissed, gesturing to where Talia's hand remained close to Ethan's. You've been contaminated by human weakness. Talia's voice dropped to a dangerous register. Challenge me formally or stand aside, Lieutenant. The tension crackled between them before Vex finally stepped back. This isn't over, Commander. Aboard the small diplomatic shuttle, Ethan watched Talia pilot with expert precision toward the human vessels. What will you tell your superiors? That humans possess qualities worthy of alliance rather than subjugation. Her eyes remained fixed on the controls. That I have found something among your kind that the Valkyrie have forgotten. And what's that? Her gaze flicked to him briefly. The courage to choose beyond duty. As they approached the Earth vessel, communications opened. Admiral Garrett's suspicious face appeared on screen. "Commander, we're prepared to receive Dr. Powell." "Admiral," Ethan interrupted, "Commander Talia comes as a diplomatic envoy. I've been treated with respect and learned much of Valkyrie culture. This is an opportunity for peaceful contact." The Admiral's expression remained skeptical. "We'll discuss that once you're safely aboard, Doctor." Talia landed the shuttle in the human ship's bay. Before the doors opened, she turned to Ethan, her expression suddenly uncertain. "If they separate us," she began. Ethan squeezed her hand. "I won't let them. You're taking an enormous risk for peace. They'll see that. And if they don't?" His answer was another kiss, a promise without words. When they parted, Talia pressed something into his palm, a small device with swirling Valkyrie markings. "If we are forced apart," she whispered, "this will lead you back to me." The shuttle doors opened to reveal armed human soldiers. As they stepped out together, Ethan's hand found Talia's, fingers intertwining, copper against pale, alien against human, a bridge between worlds. Whether those worlds were ready for such a bridge remained to be seen. 6 weeks of diplomatic posturing had led to this moment. Ethan watched from the observation deck as Earth and Valkyrie representatives signed preliminary accords. Talia stood tall among her kind, her copper skin gleaming under the ceremonial lights, her role as cultural liaison, a thin disguise for what amounted to political asylum. The Valkyrie High Command had not taken kindly to her decision. Lieutenant Vex had wasted no time filing formal charges of dereliction and contamination, serious offenses in their rigidly hierarchical society. "Quite the spectacle," remarked Admiral Garrett, appearing beside Ethan. "Though I still don't entirely trust them." "Trust takes time," Ethan replied diplomatically. He'd spent countless hours convincing Earth's military that Talia's defection was genuine, that her insights into Valkyrie technology and culture were worth protection. "Your alien seems to have sacrificed everything," the Admiral observed. "For peace, or for you?" Ethan didn't answer directly. Sometimes the right choice costs the most. Later that night, in the privacy of their assigned quarters on the neutral space station, Talia removed her formal regalia with visible relief. "It's done," she said, her violet eyes finding his. "Though neither of our peoples is entirely pleased with the arrangement." Ethan moved to her, hands sliding around her waist. "Are you having regrets?" She shook her head, the feather-like crest along her scalp rippling with the movement. "I've chosen my path. But we cannot stay here indefinitely. Both our kinds watch us too closely. I've been thinking about that." Ethan reached for a data tablet. "There's a research outpost on Proxima Centauri's 4th planet. Mixed species, primarily scientific. They've been requesting xenobiological expertise." Talia studied the information, her expression softening. "A place where we would not be the only ones crossing boundaries." "Exactly." Ethan set aside the tablet, drawing her closer. "We'd be just another interspecies couple figuring things out." "Couple," she repeated, testing the word. "The Valkyrie have no equivalent term. The closest would be life-bonded." "I like the sound of that," Ethan murmured, leaning up to kiss her. Their moment of peace shattered as the station's alarms blared. Talia instantly tensed, warrior instincts surfacing. "Security breach," came the announcement. "All diplomatic personnel to secure locations." The door to their quarters burst open. Lieutenant Vex stood there, flanked by 2 Valkyrie warriors, weapons drawn. "Traitor," she hissed at Talia. "The High Command has ruled. You will return for purification and realignment." Talia pushed Ethan behind her, reaching for her ceremonial blade, the only weapon she'd been permitted to keep. "I am no longer under Valkyrie jurisdiction. Your contamination cannot be allowed to spread." Vex advanced, her own weapon raised. What followed was a blur of motion, copper skin against copper as the two Valkyrie females engaged in combat too swift for human eyes to fully track. Ethan managed to disable one warrior with an improvised shock from exposed circuitry, but the second threw him against the wall. When his vision cleared, Talia stood victorious, Vex unconscious at her feet. Blood, darker than human crimson, trickled from a cut on Talia's arm. "We must go," she said urgently. "Now." This was unsanctioned, but others will come. They fled through service corridors, Ethan leading the way toward the civilian docking bay. The small research vessel he'd arranged for their eventual departure to Proxima waited, prepped but not scheduled for launch for another week. "Do you trust me?" he asked as they reached the vessel. Talia's answer was immediate. "With my life." Inside, Ethan's scientific credentials granted emergency launch clearance despite protests from station control. As they broke free from the station's artificial gravity, pursuit seemed inevitable. "They will follow," Talia said, monitoring communications. "Both our kinds." Ethan engaged the experimental drive, another research project he'd been involved with. "Not where we're going." The stars stretched around them as the vessel jumped beyond conventional tracking. In the sudden quiet of deep space, Talia turned to him, the tension gradually leaving her powerful frame. "We are outcasts now," she observed. "Neither human nor Valkyrie." "Or perhaps both," Ethan countered, reaching for her hand. "Pioneers." Her fingers intertwined with his, copper against pale skin. "The Valkyrie have a saying, new paths are forged by those willing to leave the known stars." "I like that." Ethan smiled, pulling her closer. "And I can think of no one I'd rather forge new paths with." As their vessel streaked toward distant Proxima, two beings from worlds apart embraced their shared future, a future neither had imagined when captor first met captive, but one they now couldn't imagine any other way. In the vastness of space, they had found their own constellation, two stars, different in nature but orbiting the same center, each other.